The old dog barked once, then twice, before settling back down on the porch. It was nearly dark when Elam Vickers noticed the figures coming up the fence line. Three of them, two women carrying sacks, one carrying a child. They looked like shadows peeled from the dusk. He didn't stand, just watched from the porch rail with a coffee cup cooling in his hands. "Evening," said one of them, voice hoarse. We just need a place to sit a while. We'll be gone by morning." But they weren't, because something about the smallest girl's eyes, big and blistered, like she'd seen more than her years could hold, kept Elam from turning away. No one knew where they'd come from. No one asked why the little one flinched at sudden noises or why the older girl's hands looked like they'd been scrubbed raw with lye, and no one knew what they carried in those sacks slung over their backs. But something was off. Something was being hidden or maybe protected. So why did Elam, a man known for his silence, his solitude, and his history of pushing everyone away after his brother's death, why did he let them stay? And what would he find tucked between the garden rows behind their quiet glances, beneath the battered soles of their boots? What had they escaped from? And what did he owe them after so many years spent owing nothing to no one? This isn't a story of grand rescue. It's a story of something quieter, harder. It's a story about how healing sometimes arrives in the form of tired footsteps, whispered names, and soup shared over a porch railing. But what if they weren't just looking for rest? What if what they brought with them would change everything? Stay with us, because what happened next no one in town saw coming. The prairie had long gone quiet for Elam Vickers. Years back, he'd watched the last of his cattle sold off, the last of his hired hands drift away, and the last real conversation fade with the passing of his wife. The house remained weathered but upright. The barn leaned. The land grew wild in places he no longer had strength to tend. Mornings were the same: coffee, porch, a long stare toward nothing. It wasn't that Elam disliked company. He'd just forgotten how to receive it. Out here, the wind and creaking wood were conversation enough. A man could live this way, hollowed out but still standing. One March evening, as dusk pressed soft and slow over the hills, a cloud of dust appeared on the road like breath on a mirror. An old wagon, badly tilted, rattled up his trail and halted crooked before his gate. Three women stepped down. Behind them, three children clung to the canvas edge. The first woman, auburn-haired and tall, approached the porch with both dignity and exhaustion. "Sir," she said, voice steadied by will alone. "Our wheel cracked miles back. We've got little food and no place to be." The second held a baby. The third had a limp. None of them asked for more than a night. Elam set his coffee down, and in that small, still silence between her words and his breath, something shifted, like the door of an old barn easing open after a long winter. But he only nodded. "Come in." That night, the ranch house felt full for the first time in years. But it wasn't noise that filled it, just presence. Elam Vickers lit the old kerosene lamps, let the women wash at the basin, offered what bread and beans he had left. They didn't speak much. No one did. The tall, auburn-haired woman introduced herself as Mabel Quinn. The baby belonged to Letty Wren, the one with soft eyes and a bandaged arm. The third, Ivy May, limped from an old accident and sat with the ease of someone used to pain. The children, three in all, stuck close to their mothers, eyes wide, hands twitchy. They didn't cry. That Elam noticed most of all. These were not children used to softness. He set out spare blankets by the hearth and made up the cot for the baby. The women took turns helping one another settle, murmuring in tones that had more weight than volume. Elam didn't ask what happened. Not yet. He wasn't sure they'd stay long enough to answer. He slept lightly that night. The sounds of breathing in the other rooms filtered through the floorboards like a hymn he hadn't heard in decades. At one point, just before dawn, he heard the baby cry, and then a voice, low and hushed, singing it quiet again. When he rose, the women were already gathering their things. Mabel looked at him steady. "Thank you," she said. But he only replied, "Breakfast is on the stove. If you've got time." They stayed. Just one more day. The one day turned to two, then to a third. Each morning, Elam Vickers would wake before the sun start the fire-grind coffee. The smell was his signal to the others that they were still welcome, still safe. Mabel Quinn took to sweeping the porch without being asked. She didn't do it like she owed him anything, just like she'd rather the dust not settle too thick. Letty Wren spent her time near the creek rinsing clothes, teaching the little girl May to skip stones with her good arm. and Ivy May quiet as a hawk began pulling weeds in the old vegetable bed behind the shed. None of them ever asked to stay, and Elam never said they could. But the rhythm began, and it was quiet and careful, like a tune someone barely remembered but started humming again anyway. He noticed the way Ivy would glance at the mountain ridge before bed, as if watching for something or someone. The way Mabel folded her hands too tightly when she thought no one was looking, and how Letty pressed her wrist at night holding something in. None of them talked about where they'd come from, until one afternoon when a passing mail wagon left dust along the road, and May the little girl flinched so hard she dropped her cup and ran under the porch. Her mother stood frozen eyes far off. Elam crouched low, waited. After a while he said only, "It's gone now." And from under the porch May whispered, "Not yet." It was the first time they spoke about the past without speaking of it at all. That night the air turned sharp with wind off the hills. A loose shutter tapped against the window frame in the dark. Elam Vickers sat alone by the fire, his hands loose on his knees staring into the soft crackle. The silence in the house was different now. Not empty, just full of things unsaid. Footsteps overhead, the scrape of a chair leg, a cough from the far room, the rhythm of others. He thought of asking them to leave. But then came the sound of the back door opening gentle, and the soft creak of the porch. He stepped to the window and saw her Mabel Quinn standing out in the cold in her shawl, looking up at the stars like she'd lost something in them. She didn't flinch when he stepped out beside her. Didn't speak. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. Then after a long pause, "I didn't think you'd let us stay this long." He didn't say he hadn't planned to. She looked at him, not pleading, just tired. "We won't take more than we give. I can cook. Ivy'll mend. Letty, she knows horses better than any man I've met." Elam said nothing. "I mean, she added soft if it's all right." He looked down at the porch wood traced with a child's chalk, drawing from that morning. A lopsided sun, a big square, maybe a house. Then he said, quiet as smoke, "I got a field needs turning." She smiled, just once, then stepped back inside. It wasn't an invitation, not really, but it was the first time he chose not to be alone. The days started early after that. Before the frost could cling too thick to the grass, Mabel Quinn was already at the stove sleeves rolled and hair tied back, kneading dough by lamplight, while Ivy hauled wood and Letty swept the porch with the kind of discipline that said she'd learned it from silence, not instruction. And Elam Vickers watched it all, not with suspicion, not quite yet trust either. Just that quiet habit of observing, as if afraid to blink and find it was all gone. It had been years since the ranch had felt this alive. Evenings came slower now. After chores, the girls would gather around the edge of the fire, sometimes whispering, sometimes laughing in that half-contained way of children, too used to holding things back. One night Letty came in with a cut on her palm. Barbed wire, maybe. She tried to hide it. But Elam noticed. He always did. He didn't speak, just motioned her over, fetched a clean cloth, the tin of salve he hadn't used in years. She winced a little. Then after a moment said, "Thank you, Mr. Vickers." He nodded, still crouched there. "You're welcome, Miss Letty." And something shifted in the room after that. Not fast, not loud, like snow starting to fall before anyone's noticed. Later that week, Mabel fixed the loose hinge on the barn door. Elam hadn't asked her to. When he stood there beside her, tools in hand, he said, "Most folks would have left by now." She glanced up, eyes steady. "We're not most folks." He didn't answer, but that night he added 2 more bowls to the cupboard. Not because he expected them to stay, but because he found himself hoping they might. Snow came early that year, not a heavy storm, just enough to paint the hills white and press silence over the land. The kind of stillness that made voices echo too loud in the house, and memories settle closer to the skin. Elam Vickers woke one morning to find the kettle already hot, the fire already fed. And for a moment it felt like those days long before, when warmth had a name and breakfast meant someone had thought of you before you'd risen. But by mid-morning something was off. He found Mabel Quinn outside, staring at the fence line. Her hands were clenched. Ivy and Letty were quiet behind her, their eyes not moving. "What is it?" Elam asked. Mabel didn't turn. "There was a man, out by the ridge. He saw us. Didn't wave. Just turned back." Elam's jaw tightened. "Do you know him?" Mabel finally looked at him. "I hope not. But he might know me." She didn't offer more. and he didn't press. But that night he took the rifle down from above the mantel. Not to scare, just to remind the night it wasn't welcome to linger. 3 days passed. Then one evening, as the light folded low behind the hills, a wagon pulled slow up the lane. A tall man stepped down. Broad, cold eyes. He asked for Mabel. She stood still in the doorway, her shoulders squared. The girls froze behind her. "I'm taking what's mine," the man said. Elam didn't move, just said quiet, "Ain't nothing here that belongs to you." And in the silence that followed, the man looked past Elam at Mabel, at the girls. Then he spat. "This ain't over." When he left dust trailing behind his wheels, Mabel sagged. But Elam didn't ask her to explain. He just reached to the wall and hung the rifle lower, right where her hand could reach it too. The man never came back. Maybe it was the quiet resolve in Elam Vickers' stance that night. Maybe it was the way Mabel Quinn didn't cower, didn't cry, just stood like a stone that had weathered too many storms to fear the wind anymore. Whatever the reason, the girls began to sleep easier, and slowly something in the house shifted. Not all at once. Healing doesn't shout. It slips in with small things, like how Letty started leaving her drawings on the kitchen table for Elam to see, or how Ivy began humming while sweeping the porch. Little bits of trust dropped like breadcrumbs across each day. One morning, Mabel brought out a basket of seeds and asked if she could plant near the back window. Elam nodded. "Good sun there." She smiled. "Thought so." The garden grew crooked and stubborn, but it grew. In town, folks started asking about the woman and the two girls out at Vickers' place. Elam didn't say much, but he bought extra coffee and sugar and once a bolt of soft blue fabric. That told folks enough. Spring rolled in soft and golden. Wildflowers crept across the hill behind the barn. One evening, the three of them sat on the porch steps. Letty leaned against Mabel. Ivy fell asleep in her lap. Elam came out with a blanket and gently draped it over them. He didn't speak, just sat beside them as the sun dipped low, casting the land in honeyed light. And for the first time in years, he let himself imagine something lasting. Not flashy, not loud, just someone to sit with when the day was done. Would you like to see what happens next? Sometimes healing doesn't come with loud words or grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly on tired feet, in shared silence, under a roof where no one asked too much. Elam Vickers had built a life from absence, his porch, worn smooth by seasons, passed alone, his coffee grown, cold more often than not. But then came three women who didn't knock, didn't plead, just stood there asking for a night's rest. And somehow, without words, they stayed. Not because they had nowhere else to go, but because something inside each of them knew this place. This man, this moment meant something. Over time, what was broken didn't just mend, it changed. The children grew stronger, the garden flourished, and the silence, it softened. So maybe this is what love looks like when it's done, waiting, a rancher opening his door, and three mothers choosing to stay. If this story stirred something in you, something gentle, something long forgotten, we invite you to join us again. Leave a comment below. Would you want to see what happens next in their lives, or hear more stories of quiet hope and second chances? And don't forget to subscribe to None, Wild West Saga, where stories ride slow, but stay with you long after the dust settles. We're glad you're here, and we hope you'll stay a while.